Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited today and privileged to have some former guests join me again on the InnovaBuzz podcast as part of this celebration of 500 episodes. So today's going to be another panel discussion where we get to know a little bit more about the guests and hopefully add value to you, the listener. So I'd like to start with asking each of our guests today to introduce themselves and tell us where they're from, and also, so geographically where they're from, what business they're from, and what's the impact you're making in the world today. So I might start with you, Cathryn Lloyd.
Oh, right, okay, first kid off the block. Thanks, Jürgen, and thank you for the invitation, and happy birthday to you on your 500th episode. Really appreciate it, and thank you for the panel conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody. So I am based in Brisbane, Australia, and so that's the East Coast. And right now we're having lots of rain, which is fantastic. We always need rain, really. So enjoying that immensely, and my garden's loving it, given that I've done a lot of planting recently. I have a business called Maverick Minds, and Maverick Minds is it's a coaching and facilitation organisation, and I spend time in the space of creativity and working with individuals and teams to help build creative capacity and confidence. That's the gist of it, mainly to help people to shift their thinking and create positive change. So that's the general sort of flow of things, and that ranges in all sorts of ways depending on who the client is and what it is that they're trying to do. But at the heart of it, and at the heart of what I am deeply passionate about, is helping to build creative capacity and recognizing that we all have that intrinsic quality, and finding ways to work with that in interesting and different sorts of ways. So what's the impact of that? Well, the impact of that is that often what I see in organizational life, and what tends to happen to us over time, is that we forget that we are creative and that we have this beautiful quality that is there for us to be able to work with and skillfully apply in all sorts of situations, whether that's, on our own doing stuff, or whether that's in collaboration with others. And I think organizational life can squeeze that out at times in the busyness of things or the quick fixes. And creativity, whilst it can suddenly appear, it also does require nurturing and time. And I think what tends to happen is that organizational life squeezes that a bit. So you really need to be deliberate about that and intentional. So that's what I encourage the people that I work with, is to actually be really intentional with their creativity and to have it at the heart of their conversations and the way that they work.
Fantastic. And you've set yourself a challenge this year, which I find a little bit fascinating. Tell us about that challenge.
I have. At the end of last year, I thought, and I think it's also this time, of this pandemic time of what do we want to do with this precious life? That's the thing, isn't it? And so I set myself one for 2020, which was to write seriously playful creativity. And this year I decided that I would do a daily artwork. And so it doesn't matter what it is and how long I've got, but I will produce a daily artwork which is inspired by my observations, feelings, things that I've seen, whatever it is. And I will do a daily art project. So I will end up with 365 images that I've created from my daily experiences, whatever that may be. So I'm up to day 20. Oh, well, today is 21. So I haven't done it yet, but I will get there at some point in time. So if you want to see them at all, I am on Instagram and I'm posting them on Instagram. So please check it out. Hope you like them, Jürgen.
Yep. Well, I haven't seen them all. I haven't seen all 20, but I've certainly seen several of them, and I thought that's really interesting. Several years ago, and I'm almost inspired to start this again. I set myself a challenge of taking one photograph a day and then actually posting that. But I found that really time consuming because taking one photograph is not enough. I was never happy with that one photograph. So it meant that I would have to be taking probably 50 to 100 photographs a day, and then I'd pick that one, and then of course I'd do some extra work on that. So it ended up being a very time consuming challenge. But
yes, can I just add to that? Therein lies the conundrum of perfectionism as well. And that's what can happen to us too. We get caught up in perfection. And that's the challenge that I gave myself, was to not kind of edit too much, was to just do it and not worry about it, but allow myself to just be in that process rather than worrying about the outcome per se.
That's a really good point. Yeah. All right. Wade, how about you?
So my name is Wade Galt. I live in Naples, Florida. I've grown up in Florida most of my life, lived a little bit in Peru. Parents are from the islands, so I've got a little bit of influences from different areas. And I help entrepreneurs, employees, freelancers to create and what I just simply call an abundant and sustainable lifestyle. Usually they're looking to have a 3-day weekend type lifestyle, to have a 4-day work week or something, or whatever works for them. But simply to make time for life, for family, for friends, for enjoyment outside of work, and then when in their work, to do things that are impactful and help their clients and help the people they serve, and really focus on high impact activities that ideally and usually lead to high income, which then makes it, of course, easier to create a lifestyle that's sustainable. But also there's sort of an essentialist or a minimalist approach also to just realizing what's most important in life and not worrying about the other things.
Sounds exciting. And we recently produced a joint webinar around podcasting, where we incorporated a lot of those philosophies into producing a podcast, producing a quality podcast, but in a way that it takes up the minimum amount of time and is quite efficient.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think so much of my journey with that and any of the work I do is going back to what Cathryn says, as somebody who I'd imagine most of us are on some level, and I think all people are, very creative. I got very drawn into the toys and the tools and I can do this and I can do that and it got this many likes and this and that. Like, oh, wait, you can't buy anything at the grocery store with likes. And just trying to figure out why there were likes or different stuff like that, and getting caught up into that and enjoying that, but then still remembering that at least if it's going to be something I do during those 4 days when I'm working, that there needs to be some sort of financial piece coming out of it. So for me, the line between hobby and work is sometimes blurred, but the paychecks or lack thereof sometimes help make that pretty clear.
Yes, very important point. All right, I see Maxine nodding her head there, and I know you're very much in support of that sentiment that Wade's just outlined. So introduce yourself, Maxine, and tell us a little bit about you and your work.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Maxine. I am from Canada. I live in a city, I lived in Vancouver for the last 5 years, but when COVID hit, I moved to Vancouver Island in a small town called Cumberland, and found myself craving land and nature more than people. So that's where I reside right now. I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Pick My Brain. It's a new startup that helps people package, price, and sell their time, knowledge, and experience in new and creative ways. Things like calls, coffee and conversations, private one-on-ones, and then small contracts anywhere ranging from $1,000 to $10,000. So it's a tool that kind of is an all-in-one, kind of keeps your booking, your scheduling, your payments. It's a marketplace, so it gives you that discoverability. And it's a whole community of people. We have 566 brains now from 88 different countries, playing with different ways to add value and create offers that are straight from here. They're all passion driven. And so anything that you buy from this platform is passion driven, and everything that is created on it is passion driven. And my dream really with this platform is to eventually create a marketplace as big as Amazon, only there's no products sold on Pick My Brain. There's just things like conversations and meetings with people, because I think the ultimate form of life, how I can live my best life, is experiencing as many people while I'm here as I can. And so we actually also just launched and overlaid this program called Meet the World's People. And it is a subscription-based service, similar to Audible, where you get 1 credit every month and you can use that credit to have a conversation with anyone from our database for 30 minutes. And I'm just beta testing it right now, but I believe that if we could get as many people signed up for this as there are for Masterclass, learning from the world's famous people, there would be a lot of impact. And what I've seen is all commerce starts with conversation. All connection starts with conversation. All collaboration start with conversation. So my mission while I'm here is to create and facilitate as many conversations as I can. And that impact that I'm seeking really is, I believe in a world where knowledge commerce surpasses e-commerce someday. And that we, start to value the value, or we start to understand how much value a conversation with each of us would be, and simply group conversations like this as well. What you guys are both Cathryn and Wade, what you guys have shared so far, is leaning into this world where all of my brains kind of believe into. They want to be creative. They want to make offers that resonate. They want to, work 3 hours or 3 days a week as opposed to 5. And so I think I'm excited to see this room. I'm pretty sure we'll all be on that same values line. But that's what I'm working on.
Yeah. Well, I'm just recording an audio course around podcasting, how to basically it's our entire podcasting process. And there's 2 things that you said there that kind of really made my heart laugh, because they're things that I said in those recordings, that some of the recordings that I did yesterday. One of them was that everything starts with a conversation, and that's where you really need to start. So I talk about how do you find guests for your show and how do you invite guests on. So I say, well, the first thing you've got to do is start a conversation. And that's where it starts. And the other thing is, the value of those conversations and coming from a servant's heart to share those. So, yeah, really love
That's
it.
our tagline now, Jürgen. We end all of our emails with everything starts with a conversation.
Yeah. And I think I read something the other day too that I can't remember who sent this, but it just stood out for me as well. It was kind of a headline in an email that said, it's not that you don't have enough leads, you're not having enough conversations. I thought, yes.
It's true. And you don't forget a conversation. You can forget a lead. You don't, when you have a one-on-one with someone, they're kind of in your database of mind forever. Which is really powerful. And, I would love to have a conversation at some point now. Like, I find a lot of the gurus saying it's not scalable to do one-on-one conversations. And I'm like, but the compounding rate is actually so much larger. So it's something you're not considering.
And also, also what I really like about Pick My Brain is there's the people that are on there. I mean, there's experts in various different fields. And if you go online and just search for a topic that you want to learn more of, you can find experts, and you can find some of the top experts very easily, and then you pay large sums of money to learn from those experts. On Pick My Brain, there are some of those experts as well. However, you've got people there that will put up other offers that, hey, I know a little bit about photography, for example, in my case. I'm never going to put together a program teaching people to photography, because there's lots of people that do that better than me. But it's one of my hobbies. I'm really passionate about it. And if somebody wants to just have a casual conversation about photography and understand how I do things, then they can do that through Pick My Brain. It doesn't cost them, it only costs them a little bit of time. And you get to learn something from somebody else through a perspective about something they know that they perhaps take for granted. They're not necessarily the expert offering that as a service, but it's still valuable knowledge that you can tap into.
Totally. Perspective is king.
Right. Tom.
Hello, Jürgen and everyone else, and congratulations on the 500th episode. That is super cool. I am in St. Louis, Missouri, USA, and I run a company called Story Power Marketing. We work with coaches and consultants and others who have knowledge and insight that they want to package and deliver and sell. And what we help them do is turn content creation from hard to easy, so that they can create content that transforms from boring to captivating, so that they can connect with more people who are transformed from tuned out to tuned in and doing business with them. And we do that by harnessing the power of storytelling and other content creation techniques and creation techniques in a variety of ways. And so how am I transforming the world? Well, there was a lot of that in what I just said. Really, what excites me and gets me out of bed in the morning is working with people who dread marketing, who sort of believe that they have to do it, but for them it's a grudging obligation, not something that they're excited about, not something that they feel fired up about, not something that they feel is fun. And in my work, I see those transformations happen where all of a sudden it's something they like doing, they want to do, they feel greater connectedness with the work and greater connectedness with the people to whom they're marketing, in part because they're doing what we've been discussing. They're bringing creativity to their work, which is more exciting than just the monotony of here's a tip or here's a product or whatever they used to do. They're bringing conversation to the work as opposed to the latest robotic trick. And they're just bringing their own humanity to the work. And that's what excites me, when they find a more human way to market, and in so doing they find success that they didn't think that they were capable of. So
love it.
That's what I'm up to.
Yeah, there it is. There's the tagline of our business: make marketing human again.
Yeah.
And what I love about the work you do, and particularly in your podcasting, you do a lot of work to kind of bring a really interesting story into play right at the beginning of the podcast and captivate the audience attention, and then make that link to the topic that you're going to be having the conversation with the guest about. So I thought that was really neat the way you do that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, we had fun. You were on my podcast. We recorded that a few weeks ago, and that went live last week, and got great response from people. So thank you.
Yeah, it was a fun conversation. Okay, Cat.
I'm Cat Stancik. I'm right outside of DC, so that's pretty locatable on the world globe. And basically what I do is, I'm also known as a lead boss, but basically what I do is help people make more money online. And how I do that is basically support them in finding that lead generation. I should be doing it to I want to be doing it. And finding the way that they love doing it in a way that aligns to their strengths, in a way that their audience responds to it, and what that strategy, what I call a firework experience, enables you from feeling like you're going door to door knocking to building your own hotel with all of your ideal clients in it. So I do that because that's the one way for people to get back their time, to create plus in their life. That means security plus, comfort plus, time plus. It's not just about creating a baseline. It's really about trying to achieve what are those summits that we want in our life so that we can enjoy the view at the same time.
Yeah, I love it. I love the metaphor of instead of going out to the houses and knocking door to door, build your hotel with dream clients.
Yeah, I was gonna chime in there, Jürgen, that Todd Churches would love the way she describes her business.
Yes, he would.
Yes. So Todd, for those that haven't met him, is the author of Visual Leadership, I think is the right title of the book. And he's the book is, and his work is very much about visual thinking, using that in leadership, using metaphors, using frameworks, and he was our
and storytelling.
And storytelling, of course, yeah.
Which we all know is the most effective way to market. So, and it kind of encapsulates everything that each and every one of us does. How do we create that stickiness, which is what marketing is? And how do we create something that's so unique to us? It's our story. And so no one can duplicate our essence. And so putting that out there in a marketing strategy is really what helps it makes content easy, makes book writing easy, makes conversation easy, helps you get to know people. So great point.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for introducing yourselves. Now, I'm really curious what's got you most excited for 2022 now and beyond going forward. And we might just go back in the same order backwards now, Kat.
So what's got me excited for 2022? Honestly, trying to make a long story short, basically, I used to always hate setting an intention or picking a word because it was BS and it never really worked out. And, like it's kind of a resolution. And when I started saying that and explaining that to someone, I realized that the word I'd picked last year had come true, and not in the way that I wanted, but in the way that I needed. And so this year I tried to be a little bit more intentional, because these words shouldn't be turned into goals, because when you take a beingness and make it something that you do, you actually don't really achieve it because it doesn't make it fun. So I actually ended up picking play, being playful, because that's my energy. It's my source. It's how I show up in the world, and it's how I show up best. So my plan, my intention is to not only live that in 2022, but continuously throughout my life. And so just injecting play wherever I can with whoever I work with and whoever I engage with.
Fascinating. And what was last year's word?
Ease. When you ask for ease, it can destroy things to enable the ease to come. So you have to watch out when you're asking for that. Hindsight's always 2020.
Right. Okay. So it's more positive intent this year. Tom, what has you excited for this year and beyond?
I think I'm excited about developing, or I should say nurturing, my own habits of noticing and helping to bring that to my clients. One of the things I've come to realize as I've worked with folks in my coaching program is that we bring to them some of the tactical and strategic things, and all of that stuff is foundational and for those of us who know what we're doing, fairly easy to deliver. But the essence of really getting so much of what we talk about done is building these creative habits, and it starts with noticing. It starts with listening. It starts with just paying attention, and all of it, because a big part of my thing is talking about the notion of finding your prospect story. So Kat, you were talking about our own story, and indeed that's really, really important. But if we're going to market most effectively, we also need to really dive into what makes our prospects tick and understand their stories. Conceptually, that makes sense when we talk about that, but how do we really, really do it? Well, we do it by being deliberate, being intentional about noticing, about listening. Empathy doesn't just happen. Empathy happens by paying attention, by putting yourself in a place where you can really feel and hear and understand what other people are feeling. And then how do you deliver on the promise of I've noticed, I want to creatively share what I've noticed with others? Well, you have to develop the kind of practices we were talking about earlier in terms of putting in the work to be creative. Creativity doesn't just blossom and it's not some magical thing that happens because a muse shows up out of nowhere and lets it happen. So noticing and being more intentional about creating, and somehow being able to share those processes and systems and habits with the people I work with, so it gets easier for them.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say systems and processes and habits, because I think that all of these things we say, well, you can build a framework around this and you can follow a standard process. And I know you're really strong on the idea of process and yet being really creative in the stories you construct and the stories you notice and learning about your client. So I think that's a really powerful approach to actually construct a framework around how you do that and then keep refining that framework.
Yeah, and it's why I so liked the conversation you had with Cathryn in the recent podcast. When I talk about creativity with my clients, or even when I just talk about the notion of storytelling, so many prospects and clients will say, well, I'm not a creative person. I don't have that magic in me. They'll say to me, oh, you're a genius. You're a creative, and it's no. It's not about genius. It's not about magic. It's not about, summoning the muse. It's about, as Cathryn was talking about, you're busy working. And it's what, before the call, I shared with her that, I was inspired by her quote from Picasso that, when inspiration strikes, you want it to find you working. And I think there it is, right? Because we can't expect that we're going to wake up in the morning and have dreamed yesterday, as Paul McCartney claims he did. We have to habitually write in our journal and see where that takes us. We have to habitually noodle and doodle and jot and see where that takes us. And that's what I mean when I talk about systems and frameworks in order to enable creativity, but also just create for creation's sake and see what comes of it without necessarily having any intent. I have to turn this into a blog post. That's when the greatest things happen, when you're just allowing yourself to go, but you also have to know, what is it that I'm talking about? What is it that what are the lessons I want to share with my audience? Because if you don't know that, then the dots never connect.
That's right. So, yeah. A lot of it is about connecting those dots, isn't it? Starting off with the intent, what's the outcome I want? What's the transformation? I like that word, transformation. What's the transformation that I want to enable here? And then, okay, take a step back. What do I have that adds value to that conversation, and how can I connect all the dots together? Great. All right, Maxine, what's got you excited going forward from this year and beyond?
So many things. I'm gonna dovetail off what Tom was saying about connecting the dots and creativity. I have found that the biggest hurdle for people, we all are creative, but the biggest hurdle is how do I expand my perspective and my reach and my understanding of people and the world when I only have access to my own bubble and I don't know what I don't know. And this is the reason I created Meet the World's People, or Connect with the World's People, Experience the World's People, because I don't know how, without this program and without making Pick My Brain, I could have conversations with an 81-year-old Holocaust survivor and the next day talk to someone who's a 17-year-old from Morocco who's trading Bitcoin, and then hop over to Japan to a 70-year-old samurai master, and then, jump over to Australia and talk to Jürgen about photography. And if I did that over the course of a month, my ability to connect dots becomes so strong and potent that it feels like people think that I'm just naturally creative as well, like you, Tom. But I'm like, no. I just talked to so many people. I've talked to 100+ people this year from different countries, backgrounds, cultures, industries, age groups, and have dug in with them and asked them a few simple questions. What makes you tick? How did you get to where you are? What do you care most about in the world? And in 30 minutes, I feel like that download that I've received is just the strongest source It's straight from the source. It's real and raw, and it's through all of those conversations that have now come my way has enabled me to see the world like a web, like an ecosystem that's mapped to the same way as our neurons are mapped, that the same way the root systems of the trees are mapped, the same way that the mushroom mycelium is mapped, this interconnected web. But we cannot reach that interconnected web unless we can reach outside of ourselves. And I haven't seen any products or subscriptions that allow me that level of diversity or that level of accessibility to have a friend that's 84 years old. I'm sad that I can't have that. Now I can because I created it because I really wanted it. But I really believe that, this is the solution. You want to become more creative. You want to become more connected. You want to better understand the world and the people in it. Join this program. It's $10 a month. And it will change your life because it will give you that opportunity to ask anybody questions. And in doing so, everything will open up from there. So I'm the most passionate about this program. My coach kind of asked me, okay, let's picture this program, past beta stage. Where does it get to? You're on your TED Talk talking about this program. And again, I just want to start that TED Talk with being like, I had a dream of connecting 1 million people around the world through a one-on-one conversation, a 30-minute conversation. And this is how I did it. And then just talking about, the process to do it. I needed a subscription. I needed a supply base that was insanely diverse. I needed it to be very affordable. I needed people to understand the values of the program. And then just talking about all the conversations I've had on the program and where they've led. I found love, I found investment, I found my employees, I found travel plans. The co-benefits that come from conversation are far go past just commerce, and I think our world is so focused on that one track. We have been for so long. And I think we're finally starting to be like, oh, there's so much more about life than just making money. Yes, it's an absolute essential, but man, the colorful doors that you open up beyond that, when you can let go of that are deep. Like my bookshelf is now, just so rich and so broad. And I wouldn't ever be able to get that in my own silo, because I can't step outside without someone pulling me outside. And every brain that I pick, I look up where they live in the country. And so I'm starting to get a better sense of countries and cultures. And that's really powerful. So it's all these little co-benefits. So I'm most excited about taking Meet the World's People, crafting it to what I know it can become, and fearlessly announcing that everyone should be a part of this. This is such a subscription, this is such a prescription for all the things that we're all needing right now at this exact time, is to connect and start talking again. What is the best life that we can all live? What does make you wake up? What have you realized in your experiences about life? And we just empower ourselves through those conversations. So that's the one. That's the thing that's getting me.
It's got you really excited. Yeah. We can tell. We can tell. What I really love about the platform, in some ways, it reminds me of the podcast. I have experts on each episode, and I get to learn from them. And I've gotten up to 500 episodes. So obviously, I've got a nice network there. But I don't have the diversity because I'm very focused on a number of topics, and I'm very careful about who I select. So I often tell people who pitch to come on the show, I say, no, you're not a really good fit for what we're trying to do, for my audience, and so on. So it doesn't have that diversity. So with Pick My Brain, you're not locked into that. It's got to fit this mold, which I've set for the podcast. And so you do have that huge diversity. And certainly, I've established kind of social media friendships with people on Pick My Brain that I never would have met, and that are so different from me that I never would have probably taken time, if I had have just randomly crossed paths with them, taken time to have a conversation, to understand their world, to understand where they're coming from. The classic example for me, and you know who I'm talking about, is a person who is a trans person, and has undergone discrimination and bullying and all kinds of nasty stuff because of that over their life. And this person is probably one of the most knowledgeable people I have ever met. Ask them anything and they will give you chapter and verse. It's like, you don't need Google. You can ask Katie.
Yes. Yeah, I love that.
And just fascinating people like that who you have this opportunity to meet, but in normal life you never would go out looking for somebody like that, or even if you cross paths, take the time to have that conversation and make that connection.
Yeah.
So,
or know that you have the permission to dive in with her.
Yeah.
Hey, can I ask you some really personal questions? Because she signed up to have people ask her really personal questions.
Mm.
It's like when you meet someone, you still have to like test it out. If you got to do the dance a little bit, like, can I ask you if you do psychedelics right away? Probably not, or like these questions that we're pushing boundary lines on, with this, you can, it's the person who signed up to let you in.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great example, Jürgen. Thanks for sharing that.
All right, Wade. What's got you excited?
So I am extremely excited about a couple things, and they connect with each other. I'm very excited about helping. My goal for this year, mission intention, is to help 1,000 people ish, whatever it looks like. That's the intention. We'll see how it plays out, to create their abundant 3-day weekend type lifestyle, whatever it looks like for them, whether it's working when their kids are at school and then being present all summer, that sort of stuff, just because I've experienced what that's like. There's things I've let go of to have that or don't pursue as much, but I've enjoyed that so much. And I'm also looking forward to, after about 20 years of being an entrepreneur and still separating what makes me money from what's my hobby and my passion, this is one of the few areas where I actually can make a little bit of both, and looking forward to doing that, because I've gone with this possibly even story, kind of like what Kat had said about, careful what you either wish for or intend or think about or ruminate on, or, there's money over here and then there's fulfillment over here, and some people can do it right, but I just can't seem to get that right. And what I'm just finding more and more is the part of me that I'm thinking I need to put to the background, or maybe that 20 years ago as a male, you wouldn't on your LinkedIn profile say that I write books on spirituality and I help consult insurance agencies and I write books on parenting, and because these people don't exist. You can't have people that do all those. You got to pick a lane, for God's sake. And having grown up in sort of that world and a little bit of corporate influence and that sort of stuff, as opposed to saying, dude, there's 7.5 billion people on the planet. Somebody's going to be into Hawaiian shirts, working 3-day weeks, or having 3-day weekends, being an entrepreneur, and telling stupidly inappropriate jokes / dad jokes, and those are my people. Those are my bumblebees. If you ever seen the video by Blind Melon, No Rain, like that one, all I can say is that my life is that one, and the girl is looking around the whole time. She's dressed like a bumblebee, and she goes around. And the city's kind of gloomy, and she's all happy, and she's dancing, and she's just grooving. And if you've never seen it, you have to see it. So she's looking around, and all these people are looking like, you're weird, you're this, that. And then at the part of the song where it goes, woo, and there's a guitar solo, there's this field of bumblebees, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, tall, short, skinny, everything. And she finds her bumblebees. And so to me, it's like when you find your bumblebees, and even more so, that you're not scared to say, bumblebees, is it okay if I charge you for what I do? That you're like, no, dude, of course, because we all got to live and enjoy our thing that we do. I very much love Kat's analogy of the hotels. So I guess mine will be, I don't know, a beehive or something that attracts people or something like that. But yeah, so I'm really excited about doing that. So many of the things that I wasn't doing before, that I guess also just as a provider, as a husband and a father, who our children are 15 and 13, now reaching a point to say, okay, like they've made it. And if I really, really do poorly on this, well, I guess they can find a job and it'll be okay. So I'm actually a little more willing to take risks that before, even though we were living in Peru and back and forth and living in the United States and doing all these different things, that other people are like, well, how do you do that? So much to the point of what Tom was saying, no, I just chose to do these things. And so now I'm choosing to integrate those things and adopt a different story. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, there's lots there, and certainly a lot of excitement around what's coming up. So thanks for sharing that, Wade.
You're welcome.
Right. Cathryn.
That was fascinating. There's just so many threads there that I could pick up on, and like nodding away and realizing, and yeah, fantastic. I really enjoyed that. So what's got me excited? Well, the fact that it's a new year, that it's full of possibility, and there's opportunity. There's always opportunity. I guess the few things that are really kind of attracting my attention at the moment are continuing with Maverick Minds and building my business around that. And it's started well, which is great. I ran a creative strategy session for a group of a leadership team the other day, and it was great. And they were ready to be in that space that was challenging for them, but open and curious enough. And I really felt that we made a fantastic connection in that regard. And one of the things that I exposed them to were things, like around the improvisational work, but also the notion of being a reflective person and taking that time to get on the balcony, as the adaptive leadership stuff talks about, is getting on the balcony and having a good look around, but being on the dance floor as well, and kind of being in it as a busy bumblebee as well. So there's various ways of being. So I think they really made a connection with that. And so I think that leads into a couple of other things that I'm really looking forward to working on, which is a book that I'm collaborating with my colleague Andrew Rickson, called Facilitating with Stories, Ethics, Philosophy and Reflective Practice. And we wrote a book in 2019 called The Story Cookbook, Practical Recipes for Change. And this is kind of like the next part of that. And so we've got people sharing their facilitation philosophies. We've got people writing some chapters around ethics and storytelling. I've just written my chapter on reflective practice, which is a good draft, and there's a little bit more work to do. And I think that, idea of being creative and reflective, of being in action and reflection, is a really important element of being, a professional, in any way. So that we've got a deadline for that around about April, so we're really getting into it. The other one is my book, Seriously Playful Creativity, and spending more time with that. I got it out in 2020. Various things happen, and it's time to look at it again and spend a bit more time thinking about where's the next stage for it, and how I'm going to work with it in other ways. And I've been using it in my coaching, and I think it's a great tool in that regard. So I need to rethink it and develop it in different ways. So there's lots of projects to be working on, and collaborations, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the year unfolds. If I could just pick up on a couple of little points there, I loved the noticing that Tom mentioned, because I think that's a really crucial part, and it is one of the things that I actually talked about quite a bit with. Notice what you notice. What are you noticing about yourself? What are you noticing about the context that you're in, the environment that you're in? And that noticing is really, really crucial. And it's really crucial for creativity, because it's like what we notice are those things that we can start to, become more engaged with, because it's attracting our attention. Why is it attracting our attention? What is it about that? So I think that's great. And that's emerging out of my daily art project. So I'm seeing that with that noticing happening, that I'm noticing various things and I'm making connections. So if I can just share a little story about the artwork that I did yesterday, was my frustration with technology. And I love technology when it works, and when it doesn't, it's incredibly frustrating. And I'm not a real techie, I don't really like hanging around doing. Lots of people like geeking out on technology and they like problem solving, and I'll do that to a degree. But I really also just want it to work and get on with other things. So where would I prefer to be would be in nature or in my studio, rather than having to fix technology necessarily. And I saw my bird that visits regularly, and her name is Cheeky, and we have little conversations. And at that time, I was very frustrated about this technology. She sat there and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and I thought, look at you and your technology, which are your wings. And I love that. And I thought, you just fly away and be free. That's what I want to do right now. I just want to fly away and be free. And so I went and created this artwork about, taking flight and wings and being inspired by my regular little bird that comes and visits, and recognizing that she has some pretty fantastic technology, which are her wings. And I wouldn't mind having that technology.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm sort of into observing birds around here. We've got lots of birds here visit. I mean, you probably all know my story about the parrots that come and steal the almonds. Although this year there must be plentiful food around everywhere, because there's still plenty of almonds there. They have taken some, but there's still plenty there. We've also got, and I observed this spring, we've got a couple of butcher birds, they're called. Cathryn probably knows what that is.
That's cheeky. That's cheeky.
And they have nested in some Banksia plants. Cathryn will know those as well, in our back garden. And they've become very friendly. So they'll actually come down and observe us in the garden when we're gardening, and actually chatty. They actually have conversations. It's quite interesting, and to observe that is fascinating. But the thing that really struck me, one day both my wife and I were out in the garden, and we heard this like the call of a young chick from inside the tree. So clearly there was a young chick in the nest there, and we saw the parent birds were in two trees about 2 meters away across the garden, and they were making a bit of a racket, but it wasn't any aggressive racket, or it wasn't directed at us. It didn't seem to be directed at us, and we thought, what's going on here? So we just sort of paid a little bit of attention, and all of a sudden, out of this tree where their nest is, comes the little chick. Well, actually wasn't little, it was about half the size of the adults, flapping into wings madly. It sort of descended very rapidly, and then about a metre from the ground suddenly got some lift and managed to get up into one of the trees. And we said, that's its first flight. We've just observed its first flight. So they were calling it, and come on, you can do this.
Right.
So, you notice something like that, because it's kind of like when your child takes its first steps.
Indeed. Absolutely. Nature at its best.
Yeah. And I found when I was doing that challenge that I talked about earlier, that there's, when you come back and look at those photos, now why did I take that photo, or why did I pick that photo, and noticing what was going through your mind, or what inspired that, or why you took it from the perspective that I chose, why I took it from the perspective I chose. They're always good questions and give you some insight.
Yeah, I love that.
All right, now we've gone quite a bit of time, but I think it's been a fascinating conversation, and we're connecting dots with themes through story and conversation and noticing things and creativity. What I'd like to ask is, based on your experience with the InnovaBuzz podcast, what can I do better as we go into the next 500 episodes? I might start with Tom.
Oh no, I was just thinking, I hope he doesn't call on me first, because I'm still busy processing all the things that I've learned about podcasting based on the good things that you do. And so I guess the way I might answer comes from the conversation that we've had today, which is to give yourself permission to broaden the scope. You've talked about the notion that people have come to you and you've said it's not necessarily a good fit. Maybe you should challenge yourself to discover how people who come to you, who at first glance don't seem like they're a good fit, how you can get to know them a little bit better, or discover what thread they may be able to deliver that can be woven into the tapestry that you're putting together. I don't know if that will work, but I think that's an interesting challenge for you. And you and Todd talked about the importance of thinking inside the box before you think outside the box. You've built a very, very good box.
Yeah.
And now I would challenge you to think outside the box.
All right. I'll take that on board, yeah, for consideration. Thanks, Tom. Max.
Jürgen, I think you're so good at what you do. It's hard to, like, I'm just so impressed with your processes and your standard, like how you receive people, how humanizing your podcast is, the people that you bring on. You're completely trustworthy, reliable, consistent, and like I idolize those things because I'm like kind of a little bit more sporadic, and like so I just like lean into that of what you offer. So I think you've done a fantastic job. If I was to brainstorm out loud with you, I would maybe dovetail again off Tom, but take it in a slightly different direction. Could you go back to your 500 guests, or the number of guests that you've had, and I know a few of them have done twice, and ask them to talk about something completely unrelated to their work, so that I can build a different version of a relationship with them. So now I've heard, their business and their focus, but maybe just like you could talk about photography for hours and a perspective, I'm sure some of your guests could also open up another chapter of themselves to you. And I think doing that would reduce the effort, the energy input in finding new always. I think we're always on that quest to find new and new, but you have found your group. They're really good people. So can you go deeper with them? Can you surprise them? Because I think they would all unanimously, based on how you've received us all, say yes. So you've got that, and tweak you asking me to do something completely different than what I work on is an interesting challenge as well. And I don't know, I'm always looking for podcasts that, are trying to build, like, people have so many chapters, and I'd love to learn more and more about them. So that would be my dream out loud impromptu suggestion.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I really like that. Okay, thanks for that, Max.
You're welcome.
Wade, you got some thoughts?
Yeah, wow. Well, I echo both of the sentiments from Tom and Maxine. A couple thoughts on a specific level. I love, as I've told you, that's why we did the webinar together. I love the way you produce your podcast. I definitely think video clips on a very technical sense of you and the person talking definitely can help. On another thought, kind of similar to what Maxine said, I'm seeing the six of us here, and I wouldn't wait 500 episodes more to do something like this again. And maybe there's an ideal number to play with it, because I've been thinking of doing this with mine. I start thinking, what if on a certain topic, I brought these three people together who actually have slightly different technique, views of the world. And that would be kind of the first degree exploration. Of the second degree would be to put together people that don't even remotely seem to have the same things, but just because somebody says, I'm an artist, doesn't mean they don't know how to manage their time. Or just because somebody says, I do spreadsheets, doesn't mean they're not creative. So I think there's something, and you definitely, in my opinion, have a gift of getting people to connect, to feel warm, to feel safe, to share. You attract amazing people, and I guess I'm an amazing person. That's pretty awesome. So from that perspective, I just think, to Maxine's point, going deeper, letting people have more chapters, because most of us are multi-passionate. Most of us have so many things. And when I'm doing podcast interviews, especially when the person's so pushing their book, I'm like, okay, I want to talk about everything but your book until the last 2 minutes. And yes, we'll talk to your book, but I want to find out about you. Yes. Because most of us, if we're this creative, and if you've even if you've lasted the entrepreneurial field, if you've even tried, only 10% of the people on the planet are entrepreneurs. So if you're even trying, that's already an awesome filter. And again, you attract great people. And so I think that, and then maybe even considering that you're one of the people in that thing too, because I'd love to hear your answers. And you're such a great host, but I think sometimes your take on it too. So something just a more experimentation, and maybe it is that once in a while, but I just find there's something magical in what you put together and people you bring together. And just like what Maxine is doing is taking things in a different direction. As far as how people connect and so on, I think we need to be sort of loosened from what it is that we say we are. And I don't think we have to create a second or a third or fourth or fifth podcast. We have to create 15 podcasts and say, well, this is my one on being a nice guy, and this is my one on having a spiritual dimension to me. I think those things can be brought in. So yeah, just experiment, play to, if we can take the trademark from Cat's focus for the next 20, 30 years, we'll pay royalties on that if we have to.
Sounds good. Yeah. I appreciate that, Wade. And I really, I'm really enjoying these group conversations, and it's kind of been in my mind since I've done a few of them as a podcast that this would be cool to do. So building a framework around that and how that might play out. So stay tuned for that. And also episode 501, so I'm letting the cat out of the bag here now, but by the time this airs, it'll be all sorted anyway, is going to be another special episode. And I'm trying to put together a panel of people that put me in the hot seat. So they'll be asking me questions and grilling me. But hopefully it's still going to be a good conversation. Cat, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're doing that with a panel. And I would say, don't wait for 501. Don't exclude yourself from the conversation. What's your word? What's your intention? What are you excited about? Part of it too, as the authority and expert who's brought all of us together, is to also share your opinions and your thoughts. And I'd love to hear a little bit more from you as part of driving the conversation. The other thing I would say is this is more of an introspective thing, which is, what were your goals with establishing the podcast? Are you meeting those goals? And there's certain numbers that you measure. And yes, we don't need to have millions of downloads. I am definitely on Wade's same chapter, page, and verse on that one. But, then I start looking at the processes and the systems on the back end of, is the podcast doing what you wanted it to do? And if it's not, therein lies all your opportunity, and forget any opinion that we have.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's kind of interesting because when I first started the podcast, and this is going back over 7 years now, it was a mentor of mine that said it would be a good positioning and marketing exercise. And I had always been a fan of audiobooks before podcasts, and then of course podcasts. And when he said that, I was still in this mindset of, you've got to have a really good sound studio, and it's only for radio organizations that have this sound studio that can do podcasts. But when he explained to me what was needed and how I could start with essentially the minimum viable sound studio, I thought, I can do that. And then as a bit of a techno geek, I was inspired to set it all up and give it a try out. I'd built relationships over the course of my corporate career with a lot of people internationally, and I thought, this is my chance to reach out and have conversations with them again, because in my small business I didn't really have a professional reason to have professional conversations with them. So that was kind of the start, and the intent was really to use it as a marketing tool and a positioning exercise. Over time, it completely changed because I realized that this was my ticket to meet people and to talk to people. And as an introvert, I find it really hard to go to networking events and meet people and talk to people and start those meaningful conversations. And all of a sudden, my podcast became that tool. And I thought, this is really cool. So it kind of changed a lot. And I guess that second part definitely has been, it's been the thing that's been hugely successful and also kept me going. It's been, inspirational for me to meet these people and to learn from them, to continue those conversations. So I'm kind of looking at how can I expand those conversations. Thanks for that, Kat. And Cathryn.
Thanks, Jürgen. And it's a great reflective question, as every good professional will do, is reflect on what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're doing it. I would sort of concur with, most of the comments there about, experimentation and looking and challenging yourself, most definitely. And then, as Kat said, and then you can ignore everything as well. however, I guess the couple of things that sort of really jumped out at me too is the idea of, and Wade said this earlier on about having to choose a lane, and this is this whole thing of we're constantly being asked to kind of really define who we are, who our audience is, and all of that sort of thing. And for some of us, it's challenging because we are multi-layered and there's lots of different aspects to us, and so kind of confining ourselves can be quite challenging. And so that integration can sometimes be even more useful because it's a much more humanizing thing, because we're not siloed people. We are these complex creatures with lots of different sort of interests and needs, and I think if we contain ourselves too much, then potentially that's where our creativity gets lost too, because we're so narrowed, we can't possibly kind of see that other things are available to us. So there's something about that maybe opening up the lanes a little bit more could be potentially useful. Kat stole my question, which was about, why did you originally start the podcast anyway? Because that might, sort of help you to sort of think about where you're at. And then a couple of other things in there were things like, I love the panel conversations, and I think the panel conversations could be something to really consider. And then potentially going back to people that you've already, had been on the show and bringing them into a panel conversation could be a regular sort of feature in that regard. And then two other little things could be like micro moments. So you, Jürgen, could share some of your learnings as little micro moments on the podcast where you're just reflecting on, you've had X, Y, Z, on the show, you gather that as a little micro, and that's just a bit of, the essence of some of those conversations for people, in that regard. And maybe you could share a podcast about your photography or something like that too, in a really personal kind of, podcast that you just share, your passion for photography.
Yeah, all great suggestions. So lots of ideas there. Yeah. Now, one of the things that conversations we've been having internally here at InnovaBuzz over the last couple of weeks is we need to put a hold on the conversation recordings that we're doing, because the last recording I did this week, I told the person we're not publishing till April, and their immediate reaction was, "Oh, that long." So I thought, yeah, we're getting back into this. I was in this state a couple of years ago, and I actually ramped up to 2 episodes a week because we were having so many conversations. But now I've said, just restrict it to 2 a week now for the next period, so that we don't keep adding to the backlog. But yeah, we'll have to think about how to experiment and play and change things up a little bit. I'm certainly excited by these panel conversations and some of the events I've run in the past. I've been thinking about how could they become almost like a podcast and at the same time still add the value that they have been adding to the participants of the event in connecting them and starting up meaningful conversations that then lead off outside of that environment, lead off to other things between those people.
So to flip the script, what are you interested about 2022 and what's inspiring you?
What's got me really excited, we're focusing very much on our whole podcasting game now. As I said earlier, I'm just completing a new audio course, which essentially is just going to be a lead magnet, and it describes our process from start to finish in a reasonable amount of detail. I mean, there's not enough detail there for somebody to take it and start a podcast and do everything we're doing, but if people have a little bit of knowledge, they can fill in the gaps and they can probably get there real quick. The idea of that, of course, is that it'll support or bring people into our world that are interested in either starting a podcast or improving their podcasting game, and they might want to talk to me about how we can help with that. One of the things that occurred to me, and it's come out of this reflective moment in some ways, is there's lots of people out there that have content. Maybe they're book authors, maybe they're regular bloggers, maybe they send out a daily email, that are not doing podcasts. A lot of book authors, for example, regularly go on other people's podcasts as guests in order to promote their book and get in front of a new audience. That's a good strategy. It's limited though, because each time they come on somebody else's podcast as a guest, it's kind of like, unless you're on Wade's podcast, who wants to get to know you deeper and only gives you 5 minutes to talk about the book, but usually it's, well, tell me about the book, give me a high-level overview, why did you write it, what are the key takeaways? And in a half-hour or hour conversation, they're going to be covering the same things pretty much in those conversations. And yet there's so much rich content there that, let's say there's a book of 20 chapters, that could be at least 20 podcast episodes that they could do themselves. It's all up here in their head. It's all written down on the book. They've probably got another 20 or 30, bits of content that didn't make it, extension information, whatever. And I thought, how can I help these people get a podcast? What's the biggest issue? Why they do podcasting as guests? Why don't they do their own? And I think bottom line comes back to the time. They really don't have the time to do all of the setup at the front end, to do the recording, the editing, the production and the promotion. And I thought, well, we do that for ours. We've started doing it for other people. We've launched podcasts. We produce podcasts. All they have to do is give us the recordings. And I thought, what else can I do to make it even easier? And I thought, I'll just bring them onto our recording platform and have a conversation with them. Tell me about chapter 1. Why is that important? Can you explain that a little bit more? Do you have an example? Tell me a story about that. And record that with them. And then they're done after half an hour or an hour of conversation. They're done, and we do the rest. So essentially they're doing the same amount of work as for their podcast guesting, but they have their own podcast. So that's something that
Sounds
I'm
great.
starting to promote, and really excited by that. Because I know I've spoken to quite a few authors now who are in that kind of boat, and I know they're pretty excited about the possibility of being able to do that without any extra work effectively.
I love that, Jürgen, and it's something, if you don't mind just jumping in, I think as somebody who's written, when I was younger, a bunch of books and really not sure I want to do the audiobook, that could even possibly be an audiobook companion that goes on Audible, and maybe they never record the audiobook. But because people, they'll do the audiobook and they'll have, the author comments. Maybe the whole thing could be the author commenting, and people still getting a sense of what it's like, because I don't know, I guess it's like if you ever go to see a band in concert, and if you've listened to the song, 1,000 times on the radio, you're like, well, this is how it's sung. Yeah. Then you go to the concert, like, well, they didn't sing it that way. It's like, no, they sang it that way once. That's and then some actually do practice and they keep, but some it's like something different. So, like you said, if they really wrote the book, they know the information, and so it might even be more liberating for them to share. Oh, here's what I left out. Here's this and that, and gosh, I mean, just also the concept of they don't have to think much more to do it. So I think that could be, it'd be awesome.
Do you remember the VHS, the pop-up videos on like MTV or whatever it was? And so you'd have the video that you've seen a million times, and then all these unique little interesting tidbits really started making you feel like you got more connected to the video. You understand the creative process. That would be really interesting. And I think would be a huge value add to anybody who's a book author, is to kind of do these, but you can't do it by yourself. Like you have to have someone prompt it, because it's like, you can't see the picture from the frame. You can't read the label from the inside of the jar, right? Like, you know these things, but until someone asks that question, it doesn't come out as like a channeled message or something that way, which is what I love about what you're saying, Jürgen, is, and what we're coming down to, which is you can't do everything. And so really understanding of what is that desired state, and then who are the people in your life or that you can start researching or ask for a recommendation for that can do it for you so you get it done, because done is better than not. Yes, imperfectly. And if you be, because English is a second language, clearly, if you're strategic about what you're trying to do, right, and just take a little bit more effort, then the results can be that much more, expansive and abundant. So that just, was a really, really great example there.
Yeah, I agree. You're like a new version of Blinkist, but better. Blinkist gives me the high level notes of the book, but I'm not interacting with the author at all.
That's right.
Yeah, I like it.
I think it's a great idea. And I also think because you're already familiar with the tools of the transcription tools and so forth, you have an opportunity to build a package, might be a plus package for what you offer, where the you're turning that conversation into written content as well, a series of posts of whatever it may be, because so much of that, I try to do that with my own stuff, have VAs go in, but I find myself, I have to point the VA to the copy that I think would make the good post, and he can do the technical stuff of transcribing, pulling it, posting it, but you have the insight and the ability to make some of those decisions, and so there's a whole content repurposing package that you could put together that would be very, very valuable.
Yeah, and a lot of this comes back to the whole process that we've built around our own podcast and how we can apply that. And then, of course, if we're suddenly overwhelmed with demand, we also have everything documented to the way that I can very quickly bring people on board, train them up, and get them producing that content and producing those shows very quickly. So it's
you can't
delegate
until you can't delegate until you document.
Yeah,
you've documented.
And Tom, now I see as the last one on the launch day, I see a live stream with readers asking questions, you facilitating that, and that becomes the other bonus. Like, so there's just so much you can do with this. And I just saw your avatar. Your avatar, I think, could be, not that you have to have an avatar, but if you do subscribe to occasionally that exercise of, who would really, the introverted author who's not as open to this. And I would definitely suggest, and I'm nominating Kat, by the way, because she has a different style than yours. You are also good, but another person that's also two people helping you pull from this person, or maybe two or three people, something just like this, where you say, okay, this person does this. People that are either their peers or their friends or who know them well can joke, like literally something that's very animated, and then some people, and then maybe one lucky fan gets in this drawing or whatever, and they get to be one of the people. So just something that pulls out from them, because the more I've listened to podcasts, I hear so much magic come from people, and I'm like, wow, the book was maybe even boring, or like the reading of it was boring, or it was okay, or people are raving about this book and I didn't really see. And then I hear the podcast, like, oh my gosh, this person's got so much to them, and maybe they're just not all that articulate at turning that into words, or maybe I just didn't get it. But yeah, I think there's so many things you can do with that here. So
yeah, lots of great ideas.
Got a winner.
All right, well, thanks very much. I'm just looking at the clock now and realize that we've been going for quite some time, so I think it's a good point to wrap it up now. I'll wrap it up just quickly. If each of you can let us know, where can people reach out to you and maybe continue this conversation? What's the best place? Cathryn?
LinkedIn is great. Please find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to link in with everybody here, most definitely. So Dr. Cathryn Lloyd, Instagram, which is Maverick Minds 1. I do have some Facebook, Maverick Minds Facebook. Email me. I'm around. So I'd love to make the connection. Website, of course, maverickminds.com.au.
Excellent. And of course, we'll post the links in the show notes to this episode. Kat, where can people reach you?
Well, once I unmute myself, then they can. So of course, there's always the standard stuff, but I always like leaving people with, freebies and value and complimentary things. So, we're all here, we're all podcasters. And one of the things I like to do is actually build my community of podcasters as well. So I have a free podcasting and networking mixer that I host every month on the second Friday of the month at 12 p.m. And you can find and register for complimentary at leadbossmixer.com. And other than that, just, if you type in Kat Stancik, you're going to find me. So, I get around the internet.
Great. Thanks. Wade.
If you want to see more of the books and all the different work I do, you can go to wadegalt.com. And if you want to start working towards creating your 3-day weekend lifestyle, you can go to 3dayweekendclub.com. And there's a free community there where we're helping people just start getting into the conversation, doing some of the work, understanding what helps people get started in that direction, and going deeper from there for those people who want to really go further with it.
Great. Max.
Pickmybrain.world. I invite you to build a profile if you would like to get invited to our mixers. We host once a month, every month too, with our group, our community, where we mix and match people in breakout sessions so you can experience Meet the World's people in a speed blitzing round. But yeah, if you're someone who wants to be available and accessible and boundary your time how you want, I really encourage you to build a profile. I think it's just the new version of LinkedIn. LinkedIn really focuses on our professional side of things. Pick My Brain really focuses on our whole human side of things. It's a really nice profile to showcase that. And if anyone would like to have a conversation, I have 10 free conversations every month, and they have brought me everything I have ever built in my life so far in this company. So I'm always open for a conversation as well.
Wonderful. And Tom?
I am available on LinkedIn, Tom Ruwitch, Ruwitch. My website, storypowermarketing.com, and email tom@storypowermarketing.com.
Wonderful. So as I say, we'll have all of those links in the show notes so people can click straight through, make it easy for you to find. And thanks so much, all of you, for joining me on this special panel conversation. I've had a lot of fun. I've got a lot of ideas. We were talking earlier before we started the official recording about a new tool I'm using to bookmark important points. And I think I've hit the buttons on that quite a number of times during the conversation that about things that I'm going to go back and listen again to even well before we publish this episode. So thanks again for your participation. Thanks for being on the show in the first place. Thanks for being in my world, and have a wonderful day.